Sports Medicine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another stellar edition of Sports Medicine. I'm your host, Carlos de Los Angeles, NASM CPT, CES, PCS, CNC, weight loss specialist, and of course, ZapFit certified practitioner. And today, we got a very special show. It's our very first roundtable in the history of the program, having two guests at the same time, and two heavyweights, definitely, two masters. I got a PhD to my right, a PhD to my left. They are the experts on sleep research and neuroscience, and we're going to be talking about everything from the second annual Society for Neurosports conference that we had last week. So welcome, Allison Brager, Jaime Tartar, to Sports Medicine.
Yay! Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So right off the bat, your thoughts on how it went, going virtual, I think for the first time also, all these challenges of these times, your general thoughts about the conference for people out there to know.
Well, I think we originally were going to have the conference in November, so we pushed that back to March, and obviously COVID is still around and it's still going strong. So we decided to do sort of a hybrid. That way people who were comfortable in person, like Allison and I, you were both vaccinated. So definitely we're comfortable in person. And then the people who aren't comfortable were able to come in sort of virtually like you did. And yep. I think it went really well. There was definitely a lot of plate spinning. And I was sort of tense the whole time that you're always worried when you do something online that you're going to lose the internet, but it went great. And we were really fortunate that our friend Julius was able to engage the virtual audience and interview the session chairs like Dr. Brager after their sessions. And it felt great. I had an amazing feeling at the end of it. I felt like I was walking on clouds, and just meeting all these new people it's so rewarding.
Well, in all fairness, I was solely responsible for the only technical difficulty when I closed out of the Zoom.
I forgot about that.
So I will take ownership for that.
Oh, man. Okay, so what are your thoughts on the future of the conference going forward now?
Well, we're new. So this was our second annual conference, and what's really amazing is that we, and Dr. Brager can tell you, I think we've done something pretty remarkable. And I think we have a really great core group of sort of Neurosports members. And what's interesting is that they're not just neuroscientists, they're not just exercise scientists. We have some chiropractic, medical doctors. We had a session with physical therapists. And so I think what's really amazing to me is to see how many different fields are really studying brain exercise or sort of brain behavior, brain movement relationships. And what's fascinating is when you get everybody in the room together, they might use slightly different terminology, but you're learning from them and you're seeing things in a way that you didn't learn that information. So when I listened to a PT at the conference talk to me about, I take 20,000 breaths a day and how important every one of those is for my performance, my mind is blown. And I think for us, as academics, we're so used to being in our academic silos. And for the people in the applied field, they're used to applied language. So I think getting all these people together in the same space, having these conversations is really important to move the field forward, to make real change. And so I'm super looking forward to the next conference. I think we're going to have a larger group and just keep learning, trying to increase these collaborations, trying to increase these relationships, the research that comes out of it. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
Amazing. And Allison?
Oh, I mean, to second Dr. Tartar, there's so many lessons learned from the first two, and it's amazing to see how quickly we have grown in the last year. And next year is probably going to be exponentially larger. And, it's pretty awesome that by our third conference, we're already going to be at this point where we're sending out a call for abstracts and a call for proposals, and we'll have to put together like a peer-reviewed panel to review abstracts and review talks. That really is what, is a sort of like a milestone in terms of whether or not an initiative is successful. When it comes to getting evidence-based
Mm-hmm.
practices and data out there to people like you. The fact that we've done that in less than 3 years is pretty incredible, and a lot of that is owed to the one and only Dr. Tartar.
Fantastic. Yeah. So interesting. And you just mentioned all the different fields and disciplines that converge in this exercise science field. And that's what I love about the NASM textbook that you guys always contribute to. They're kind of like a review, a summary of all this research in just one textbook. I love that. It's all condensed there. So it's thanks to all that fantastic job that you guys do on your research all the time. Now, speaking of research, let's bring up Dr. Wendy Suzuki, our keynote speaker at the conference. I love her bubble bath, theory of, like the exercise is for the brain and the BDNF and all these neurotropic factors. I've always loved that. She talked about how much our hippocampus and prefrontal cortex tasks improve so much after we exercise. What's your take on this?
Allison, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I absolutely love, first off, like keynote in a virtual environment. It was so engaging, right? The fact that she found a way to like connect and engage an audience both virtually and in person by doing the 3 minutes of exercise, because she has published findings that it only takes about 10 minutes for the brain to be responsive and receptive, which is incredible, right? Like, that's what I love about her research, is like this very finite temporal resolution of finding what we do in science all the time, is this dose response curve of like, what is the minimum effect or the minimum dose you need in order to have optimal effect. And it's pretty remarkable that it only takes 10 minutes of exercise in order to elicit a neuroplastic effect in the brain.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, what's exciting is some of the people who spoke at the conference who came last year, Dr. Van Praag, Dr. Rand, Dr. Joyce Gomez-Osman, who's at University of Miami. For us, and for me, it's really exciting because you read the work that they're putting out, and when they come to the conference or when they're giving these talks, it's almost like meeting a rock star. You're so excited to meet them, and I try not to fangirl, but when Dr. Suzuki's face popped up, I was a little fangirlish.
Because I first heard about her actually through my mom.
Wow.
Because my mom watches Good Morning America all the time, and like my mom doesn't really know a lot of what I do, but she it's like, oh, I saw this woman who talks about the benefits of exercise in the brain. So I was fangirling too.
And I think especially for her research, because I think it's important for people to recognize that there are these acute effects. And especially where mood is concerned. And we've shown that, we did a study where we had people run for 30 minutes on a treadmill, and we were able to show EEG measures of improved mood that matched their self-report measures. So showing that, and even thinking about exercise, and a lot of people are looking at this, Dr. Rand is looking at this as well, is looking at exercise as a complementary therapy and a complementary treatment for people who are experiencing neurodegenerative diseases. I mean, that was sort of a common theme, is that we know long-term exercise, especially aerobic exercise, does a pretty good job at increasing neurogenesis. And if you could use this as a way of protecting people against sort of age-related memory impairments to preserve hippocampal cognitive functioning, it's mind-blowing. And I think as neuroscientists, we recognize, especially I think the last 5 years, we recognize that you have to move your body. If you want your brain to be healthy, you've got to move. And there's really no way around that.
Sure. I found interesting, she mentioned the alpha power when we train, that it's actually higher. And this is related with positive affection. What does this actually mean for people out there to know? It was really interesting.
So this is sort of an EEG state that we seem to show increases in alpha power when you're paying attention to something.
Okay.
And it sort of matches the behavioral data. So and that's what Dr. Collins' talk sort of complemented that work too, because he showed behaviorally, if he exercised his participants, they had better memory. Dr. Banks is showing if he exercises people, they're able to pay attention. And so that would be like sort of the neural correlate of that.
Amazing. Fantastic. Okay. Now moving on with Dr. Ned's participation, and he talked about how only 27% of athletes approximately fully recover from a concussion. Wow, so interesting. And he talked about fear of nighttime. What is this? Fear of nighttime.
Yeah, I wonder if do you see that in your soldiers, Allison, too, that have had TBI?
Yeah, so that statistic wasn't a surprise. So when I was at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, we're publishing these findings now as we speak, but honestly, I've presented them at the most recent Society for Neuroscience conference. You never recover from a concussion, a mild traumatic brain injury, at least if you're looking at the sleep system. And I say that because in this study, we brought people who had a concussion within the last year, but had been medically cleared. Granted, these were mild traumatic brain injuries, so not moderate, not severe, mild, which, I mean, I've probably had a few mild in my life, but I didn't know what they were at the time because we didn't really have standardized concussion protocols until a few years ago.
Yeah.
But we found that a single night of sleep deprivation, so simply pulling an all-nighter, staying awake for 40 hours continuously, by hour 16, the brain starts to unravel and it loses the ability to attend and remain vigilant. And it's not until these research participants are getting adequate sleep again that their performance recovers. But one thing that doesn't change, and this is like the most critical part of our findings, is there is an irreversible permanent shift in their sleep system. So like we could go into sleep later, but there's two types of processes. And one of the processes, like basically your ability to achieve deep restorative sleep, particularly slow wave activity, deep non-REM sleep where you release anabolic hormones, it's at least a year out from a concussion, it's reduced and it stays reduced even under conditions of sleep deprivation as well. Like they still will have the recovery sleep that you usually get after sleep deprivation, but it's still reduced relative to the people who've never had a concussion. So I'm not surprised by this.
Oh my gosh.
Never recover from a concussion.
Yeah, and I think that was part of his point, and I think that's something that we need to consider, even if people are testing well. I think he wanted to underscore this idea that your brain is in a state of vulnerability after that. And we don't really, even if that vulnerability isn't able to be measured, we need to be aware that it's there. And this could impact things like return to work, return to play, this idea of returning to normalcy. And I thought that was an important point that he made. And I think it's important, and I'm grateful that he's working in this area.
Yeah. So interesting, and so it's such a important topic, especially for athletes. Yeah, as Allison just mentioned, most of us athletes, especially these hard-hitting sports, we've had some sort of level of concussion at some point. I mean, I remember wrestling. I had a match one time, and it was like I had this big slam off the top rope, and it was like I couldn't sleep very well for 3 nights, for 3 days, and my memory, and I had a terrible, mental fogginess, and I couldn't even, remain in a proper posture, erect posture. I had to, just lay down. I couldn't even keep my head up. It was terrible, a terrible headache for 3 days. So that's the worst thing you can experience is a concussion. That's terrible. But what's scary is you just talked about these side effects. A lot of times they're really, really there for a long time, and some cases even permanent damage. And that's no wonder why in sports, the rules have changed so much. Now in baseball, for example, you cannot tackle the catcher going to home plate. They changed so many rules in different sports, and because they're trying to protect these athletes from this lifetime of, all these permanent side effects. They're terrible.
Yeah.
So, definitely.
Hold that thought. You just said wrestling and high rope. Did you do professional wrestling?
Yeah.
What? Oh my God, you're my hero. I think professional wrestling, without going on too much of a tangent, is like the most athletic thing ever, because like, sure, some of it is staged, but the fact that you are lifting this, 250, 300-pound man in the air, all these aerials, that is so cool.
And one of your friends, I believe, is one of pro wrestler or so famous pro wrestler, Seth Rollins from WWE.
Yes, he is. He is a wonderful friend. Yeah, whenever he's in town, I do train with him at the CrossFit gym.
And he's a tremendous athlete. Yeah.
That you were like part of the community. That's awesome.
Yeah. He does amazing things in the ring. So he's one of the most athletic out there, huh? You can attest to that. Yeah, definitely. Okay, moving on from wrestling, back into the science, neuroplasticity and exercise science. Dr. Van Praag and Justin Rhodes and Christiane Rand. I love this topic about irisin protein. Is this a relatively new protein just recently discovered? Or maybe it's older than we think? I love the concept. And I asked a question on the virtual session to Julius Thomas, who, by the way, let's give a big shout out. They did a great job with those interviews and keeping the virtual audience engaged. I couldn't even take a bathroom break because he was giving out all these great interviews. Oh man, unbelievable job. So I asked a question about the irisin and when was this really actually released in the body? If we needed more endurance training or weight training. And she told me on the weight training, not so much. It's mostly observed in the HIIT training type of training or endurance training. Let me hear you both. You're the experts.
Yeah, I think that's what the research shows. And I think several labs are showing that certainly the aerobic exercise seems to be a little bit stronger. But again, if you're doing anything, it's beneficial, especially one of the hormones that's released from the bones may be released a little bit more with resistance training. So if you want to release osteocalcin, which also can induce BDNF, this is probably going to be released a little bit easier with resistance training or running or sort of impact type activities. Irisin, because it's a myokine that's released from the muscles, is much more sensitive to sort of aerobic exercise.
Interesting. Wow.
They both have the same, end product, which is increasing brain BDNF. What's funny about irisin is there's been some talk about maybe making sort of irisin hormone in a pill form, sort of exercise in a pill, and might you be able to reap those benefits of exercise?
That'll be perfect.
By supplementing, right, with irisin. I know in her lab, she's doing absolutely amazing work, and it was so awesome to hear all about it. But what I thought was interesting was this idea of, again, like using it as a therapeutic specifically for cognitive disorders and Alzheimer's. It's as neuroscientists, I think that's something that we're really concerned about right now, because as the baby boomer population is retiring, we're about to enter into what's going to be an Alzheimer's crisis. So anything we can do to sort of offset the symptoms of Alzheimer's is going to be really remarkable. And I think for her, looking at this particular hormone as potentially a therapeutic for Alzheimer's is fascinating.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So I also think I was super excited for this talk because I also think irisin has a role. It hasn't really been tested yet, but hypothesized in people who are resilient or recover quickly from sleep deprivation. So I do think, like, if you could hack that system for the benefit of, say, a soldier, right? Somebody who has limited sleep opportunities, that would be a wonderful thing. And the reason I say that is because when I was a postdoc, I spent 5 years discovering this protein in skeletal muscle that has the ability to regulate recovery from acute sleep deprivation. And it turns out that this protein, it's called BMAL1, it is an essential protein of the circadian system. So without this protein, the circadian system does not function. It's arrhythmic. But it has downstream connections to irisin through the protein factors she discussed. So PCG1 alpha and then FDC5, both of those are involved with BMAL1 regulation. And so I truly believe that if somebody were to do a study with irisin looking at sleep homeostasis, it would be beneficial. And in fact, after that talk, I texted my postdoc mentor at UCLA, who is still working on this project, Dr. Katema Paul, about like, hey, once again, irisin is coming up, because we had like talked about irisin years ago in a journal club or like in a lab meeting. So I think it could have many roles outside of just, improving exercise performance and maybe mitigating or slowing down the deterioration of neurodegeneration.
Fantastic. Yeah, she mentioned this is Christian Rand. She mentioned like it can actually pass the blood-brain barrier.
Yep.
So as Jaime just mentioned, there's a possibility of injections or I don't know, pills. And in any way we can get some irisin levels up through supplementation. This is a promising news. All right.
Yeah, I think just look, and I think what Dr. Brigger is bringing up is a really important point. It's something that we don't do enough as scientists. And when you think about these, myokines, and I think Dr. Van Praag, he even talked about like cathepsin B is another myokine that's really released with exercise that she's looking at. One of the things that we need to do a better job is looking at this as a systems level and not just looking at sort of single biomarker, single effect approaches.
Okay.
So, and that's why I think, again, we're working across fields is really important. Does this product also affect sleep, and what are the downstream mechanisms from that? And, this relationship between sleep, exercise, it's very complicated. I think we need to look at, a systems level, whole body approach, especially since a lot of this is bi-directional.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Okay. Now, speaking of Allison, she mentioned the 9 hours of sleep for the athletes, and sleep disturbances affect 60% of Division I football players, and even game time can correlate with injury. So the time of a game, let's hear about this. Athletes need 9 hours of sleep. For example, do a bodybuilder need like more time, like 12 hours maybe? If they're going through these really brutal routines, getting ready for a competition. Let's hear about that.
So, there's individual variability, right? Like that's why the National Sleep Foundation and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine say it's between 7 and 9 hours. So depending where you are in the spectrum, but hypothetically, you would think athletes need the higher end because of sleep being an anabolic process. And like, obviously our daily energy expenditure and our daily depletion of energy reserves, ATP, sugar, fats, etc., requires a greater homeostatic need for rest, like that principle alone. Whether or not you need 11 or 12 hours, like Roger Federer or LeBron James, is up for debate. But I think, and this is true to this day, and Dr. Tartar can verify this as well, is the single most important question as to whether or not you're recovered has nothing to do with a wearable. It has to do with the fact when you wake up in the morning, if you feel rejuvenated and refreshed. Like the Rise Time morning questionnaire, that single question has more, I want to say, like validity than anything else, because that's what it comes down to. Because there is such a degree in variation amongst humans.
Yeah, and
amazing.
When we study people, we follow them with actigraphy. I think one of the issues is there's a lot of studies that show sleep extension improves performance. We show that, a lot of people show that, but what I think people are missing is it's that when we're extending people's sleep, we're actually just getting them to 8 hours, because especially the students and these sort of younger, their baseline is 6 something, 6.5, 6 hours and 40 minutes. And so we say sleep extension, but when we apply that extra 90 minutes, we have them do 9 hours time in bed, that they actually end up sleeping 8 hours. So we're really just getting them to the right amount of sleep.
Yeah.
So that's why I've done. So a lot of the sleep extension studies were pioneered by the Army, by Dr. Tom Balkin at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And like, that's a prerequisite for our study, is like in the enrollment phase, you have to be sleeping 8 hours. Like, we study your sleep for 2 weeks using actigraphy and sleep diaries. And if you don't meet that requirement, then we disenroll you from the study, because we need to make sure you're like sleep satiated before you enter the study, and then we extend your sleep. So Dr. Tartar is absolutely right.
Yeah, we're actually doing a follow-up study with sleep extension, because we published in 2019 a paper where we showed a relationship, but we couldn't see that, we didn't know the direction between multiple sleep markers and impaired gut microbiome diversity and richness. And so now we're going to start a new study where we're going to, because I spend a lot of time doing things to people. Like I sleep deprive them, I sleep restrict them. So this study, we're going to go the other way. We're going to do something nice, and we're going to take bad sleepers that are so easy to find, especially in college campus, try to get people who sleep on average of around six hours a night, again, actigraphy verified. We're going to extend them about 90 minutes, and we're going to see if we can improve gut microbiome diversity and richness.
Interesting.
Because right now we don't know the direction. Is it poor sleep that decreases gut microbiome diversity?
Okay.
Or is it an unhealthy gut microbiome that impacts sleep? And it's probably a little bit of both, but we're hoping to show that we get an improvement in gut microbiome by extending people's sleep.
So interesting. Very, very good. Okay, now Dr. Jennifer Goldschmidt talked about sleep onset versus sleep maintenance. And where you had a 30 minutes delay of either one of these, you may have insomnia. So what's all about this? Your thoughts on this concept?
Yeah, so Dr. Jennifer Goldschmidt is actually one of my best friends. And we have these conversations a lot, and what I really value about like her expertise is like at the end of the day, when it comes to sort of identifying and treating sleep disorders, like a lot of people want to go to a pill, right? Like they want the easy fix. They're not willing to take sleep in their own hands, and that's what I really love about her approach is like using this, like doing this thorough investigation of their sleep behavior and their sleep health and all the things they do during their waking day that could potentially impact their sleep at night, and starting there. So she is a clinical psychologist who uses cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which to this day has been shown to be one of the most efficacious treatments for insomnia. So it's not a pill, it's this approach right here. And it's an approach that like is integrated within the military as well. And so I think that's really, what it boils down to is like the whole intent of like the research she's doing is to show one, how sleep amounts directly influence mood states, right? Because she also talked about napping and the benefits of napping for improving.
Oh yeah, that power nap.
Exactly. But it's this idea of really doing like a thorough investigation of behavior and then mitigating and managing whatever disturbance or issue they have from there, instead of, taking the easy way out, which honestly, it's not even the easy way out because the pill doesn't really.
The quick fix. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a fix though. It like changes the system. So it's just putting a Band-Aid over the problem.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because one of the, I think, frustrating things about, trying to get people to sleep in general is that we just don't have there's nothing on the market right now. The best thing that we can do is increase GABA, which interferes with sleep architecture. So all of your Z-type drugs, like alcohol, it'll put you to sleep, fine, but it's going to interfere with that quality sleep and your sleep architecture. So it's not about always that sleep, sleep duration. You can sleep 8 hours, but you also have to think about depth. You like we were saying, you got to get a lot of that slow wave sleep that kind of washes out your brain. Yeah. You've got to have the continuity. You've got to have the quality. All of these things matter. So just putting you down isn't always the most.
Sure. So this plays a good role in that feeling refreshed the next morning, right?
Yeah, and especially I think one of the things I really like the most about Dr. Goldschmidt's work is she does look at the role of sleep in mood processing, which I think not enough people are looking at. And there's a really important role for REM sleep in particular with preparing us to deal with sort of next day emotion processing. So one of the things the conference was so busy, but one of the things I meant to ask her, and they're such good friends, I think Allison can ask her, is I'm a mom of 14-year-old twins, they're almost 15 and they're in high school.
Wow.
And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is, we get a lot of REM, as we're sort of cycling up and down through our sleep stages, we get a lot of that REM sleep in the morning and we wake up naturally from REM sleep. And given the role of REM sleep and emotion processing, I think a lot about these high school students, and that's the part of sleep we're cutting off because they're getting up at like 6 a.m. And so I wonder if she's thought about or she's done any research on this idea of it's already a hard time. Your prefrontal cortex isn't fully online yet. I wonder, could some of the struggles that we see in adolescence, might that be due, or how much of that might be due to the fact that they're waking up so early?
No, and also I've heard it's actually harder for them this stage of life to go to sleep at night. Actually, also. Yeah, so it's both things.
Yeah, a lot of young people test as when you give them sort of the morningness, eveningness questionnaire. quote unquote, late adolescents and early 20s, they test as quote unquote, what's called owls, but truly genetically they're not. And as they get older, they regress towards their natural chronotype. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to buy Jen a beer and talk to her about that. Her thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, you bring up a great point because, so I worked in, Dr. Mary Kerskadden's lab. That's where I started my sleep research career, who did all this work to show that as adolescents go through puberty, there is a natural phase shift to the right, so a delay in their sleep time. And for school systems that adopted later school start times, it correlates with long-term improvements in academic and scholastic performance. So you bring up a great point, because the MEQ, the morning and eveningness questionnaire, it's one of those things that I think there's going to be a lot of variability when they're teenagers, but then there should be less variability as an adult.
So you just have to go back and do your study and add mood and let me know how it goes.
I mean, Mary has done those studies. This is so sad. I'll have to go back through the literature.
Because I would say, because we kept people up 48 hours technically, and they're college students. So a lot of them were up longer than we sort of, everything was verified with actigraphy. And we did, we showed them, they self-reported all kinds of mood disturbances. But then when we put them in front of an EEG and we looked at this very specific marker for emotion processing, we would show them horrible pictures, mutilated bodies, gunshots, horrible things, and show them butterflies and rainbows and kitty cats. And so when we showed them these emotional pictures during baseline and after sleep deprivation, they responded, oh, that's emotional. But when we showed them neutral pictures after sleep deprivation, they responded to neutral things as if they were emotional. Yep. So they're at sort of the subcortical level. They were no longer able to differentiate from emotion and non-emotional stimuli. Wow. Even though consciously they knew, they could say it, they could give you the correct score. But
that's incredible.
Yeah, so it's almost like a disconnect and sort of the emotion processing and instability.
That's incredible how much this affects our mood and our lives and our day. She mentioned how almost everybody reports to being irritable the next morning. That's kind of like a common symptom. We're all very cranky after a bad night's sleep, so yeah.
Actually, I should tell you, I have my husband. He's so wonderful. I have such horrible sleep inertia in general. I'm not good at wakey, eggs and bakey. So he brings me coffee in bed, and I will stay for that, if nothing else.
Unbelievable.
For many ways, but that's how you knew years and years ago.
Yeah, it's that's my person.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Wow. Okay, so now moving on into Cassandra Evans and energy drinks. We discussed with Allison in the past show that she was on back in November. The energy drinks were harmful because of the high caffeine amount, but she was actually talking about 300 milligrams. So it's kind of it's not that much really, because some energy drinks have, as much as 500, 600 milligrams, just one sitting, which is too much. So what is it really, what's your take on this? If an energy drink has 200, 300 milligrams, is that okay to take? Is it really about the caffeine amount per serving? Let's see.
So the problem with energy drinks is, so we've done these very elegant caffeine dosing studies at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And time again, we just had a new double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover study come out, is that only 200 milligrams is effective. Anything past 200 milligrams, there's a ceiling effect.
So you're just screening that?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what the source is, at 200 milligrams, that's it. The problem with the energy drinks is, one, name an energy drink that has less than 200 milligrams. Maybe the 8-ounce can of Red Bull, it has 110 milligrams. But I have yet to see that around military bases. So there's that. And then it's all these other chemical additives. There's this condition, and I talked about this last time, and Dr. Tartar can bring about it too, is it's called neurotoxicity. So when the brain is overloaded with too much information, it selectively kills off nerve cells, neurons. It's premature neuronal cell death. And they haven't obviously studied this in human studies, but in animal studies, this has been studied. And there's a lot of conservation of neurological processes between animal studies and human studies, especially at these like very, basic levels. So that's why I'm anti-energy drink. And then also we did an entire division-wide Army study, the Center of Military Psychiatry at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. We did this study where we studied 2,000 soldiers and we found a direct correlation between 2 or more energy drinks a day and risk factors for PTSD, aggression, anxiety, depression, fatigue, and burnout. So that's my soapbox opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think we need to be concerned about, I obviously drink coffee like most people.
Oh yeah, we all do. Oh yeah, I love it.
It's addictive, right? So we're all caffeine addicts, and there's actually research to suggest that the reasons that we drink coffee in the morning and the reason that it increases alertness is because we've gone through caffeine withdrawal overnight, as opposed to the
Oh my God.
effects of caffeine on its own. But one of the other things I think we sleep researchers don't like, caffeine has an antagonistic role on adenosine receptors, A1 and A2A receptors, and these are really important for just helping us to feel sleepy. Dopamine or adenosine builds up in your body during the day as a somnogenic factor to help you go night night. We all want to go to sleep, and you can think of this sort of extracellular adenosine as really kind of like a bean counter of your homeostatic sleep drive. So antagonizing that system, especially late in the afternoon, isn't a good idea.
Yeah. I've heard like mostly 4 p.m. By 4 p.m. you should have your last coffee of the day, maybe.
I don't drink it afternoon just to be safe, because there's a lot of individual variability in the half-life of caffeine. It could be from up to 10 hours in some people, 6 hours, I think, on average.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, the only time, the reason we obviously do these strategic caffeine dosing schedules is because very routinely you have soldiers awake for 24 hours plus, and they're doing high-risk things such as driving combat vehicles or doing vigilance surveillance with a weapon in an austere environment. So like those schedules are designed for people like that, or like firefighters and police who have to stay on the high alert. But for the average, office worker, like they should have their cup of coffee in the morning, and instead of having caffeine in the afternoon, they should take a nap. Like that would be the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, important to recognize too, you can, after 200 milligrams, you're not really going to be helped that much by caffeine, but in fact, you can even get some impairments, especially with impairments that are due to having like, the quote unquote jitters,
that's another one.
Inverted U relationship with arousal and performance, especially as a task gets more difficult. You don't want to be over aroused either.
Yeah. I personally when I get too much caffeine, I get like involuntary muscle spasms like this.
Oh, you're caffeine sensitive then. You're not a fast metabolizer like me.
Yeah, but that's when I get a lot of coffee. I'm talking about like a lot of coffee, because I take the real black coffee, real pure coffee. So when I take like, I don't know, an excess amount more than I usually get, when I get my usual, I'm fine, It's just when I get this huge amount of caffeine, when I'm sleep deprived and I just want to have energy at whatever cost it is, I just, drink too much coffee and I get that. So
10 espressos and you get 5 energy drinks and just go.
Yeah.
Do you not use pre-workout then?
No.
Good.
I mean, yeah.
I love it.
Only the beta-alanine, which we're going to be talking about momentarily.
Okay.
Only beta-alanine I use, of course, the creatine. Speaking of supplements, Jose Antonio was talking about creatine, beta-alanine, protein powder, and the omega-3s as being the staple, kind of like the staple for anybody who's, supplementing. So what's your take on this? Is there any other supplements you will add to this stack?
So, yeah, and I think Dr. Kalman did a lot of that too in his talk. He's the big nutrition guy. I don't know, was there anything else you prescribed for your soldiers, Allison?
No, I mean, so I put in for a funding proposal to look at creatine as as a means to stabilize performance under sleep deprivation, because if you think about it, like those creatine reserves and those ATP reserves are replenished during non-REM sleep. And so if you front load those reserves in anticipation of sleep deprivation, much like sleep extension, could it actually stabilize attention and vigilance during sleep deprivation? And turns out it does. Well, at least according to one study that has been done using the gold standard approach, which is the psychomotor vigilance test. Beta alanine, I just started getting into looking into that. I can't like speak on it as a subject matter expert, but I will say during my last workout of the first part of the CrossFit Games qualification season, which ended last week, I started supplementing with beta alanine, not because of Jose, but because you know the 5-time reigning CrossFit Games champion, he touts that as like basically having a third lung, and like it's anecdotal, and I know you have to do like a loading phase, just like you have to do a creatine. But
yeah, it's basically the with carnosine, it's a buffer. It acts as a buffer, to kind of like reduce the lactic acid buildup, or at least mitigate the pain a little bit. So it actually helps you. I'm again speaking anecdotally from my experience. It just actually helps you. Get those 2 or 3 extra reps when you're really training with high intensity. So
Okay.
But yeah, we do need more studies on that. Yeah.
Right. And I think Allison brings up an important point too, especially with the creatine. If we think about creatine, it really needs to serve that mechanistic role, especially during times where you have this sort of accelerated ATP degradation. And one of the things that we look at as neuroscientists is, I'm not an athlete. I know I look like one, but I'm not.
Athlete.
The effect of these supplements on brain function, and creatine is just one of those supplements that unless you're eating tons of red meat, you're just not getting enough.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we should supplement with. And when we think about brain health, you can follow that, the general rule: if you eat it, you don't need it, right? But if you're not getting it in your diet, that's something you should supplement with, because especially for the brain, unlike all the other organs in our body, your brain just can't absorb these nutrients from the general circulation. It has to have there's active transport mechanisms to move nutrients across the blood-brain barrier to help to restore whatever precursor molecule you need. So one of the things I think people aren't thinking enough about, especially when we bring people into a lab, we just wrapped up a creatine study, showed some nice benefits with creatine on cognition. But what we're not looking is that real life scenario, and any type of nootropic, which is sort of hot right now, they're going to have their best effects, especially with young, healthy people, when the brain's in a vulnerable state. So like what Dr. Bray was saying, under sleep deprivation, under stress, under high mental workload, doing these cognitive tasks we have them do, they're just not that hard. We get a lot of ceiling effects. So I think we probably want to do a better job of testing these supplements when the brain's in a vulnerable situation, either through stress, through high mental workload, through sleep deprivation, and see what they do in those circumstances.
Yeah, that would be great. Can't you imagine after a bad night's sleep, I'll just do a creatine buildup, like, loading, and I'll get 15 grams of creatine.
Some healthy folks, they're already doing great. Like, it's hard to bump that up further.
Yeah, that's true. But it will be great, as you just mentioned. It's interesting. How will it work on sleep deprivation? I mean, because that will be great if I can have a better, cognitive function after a bad night's sleep by just getting 15 or 20 grams of creatine. I will do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, so last point on that. So a few years ago, again, I really tried to get this like funding line of research going.
I'll fund you, Allison.
Huh?
We'll find some funding.
It's okay. It's not that it won't get funded through the Army. It's just, it has to be the right person.
But I think it's good that you're letting people know that science costs money and we can't just do these things, because I don't think
you need it.
It takes a lot of political capital sometimes too, at least on the like military side. You have to have that right place, right time, like something.
And neuroscientists, we're expensive. We don't come cheap. Stuff we do.
We're not cheap.
We're not a cheap date.
Exactly. but concussion. So there's a little bit of evidence to support that creatine supplementation can help reduce the like what we call the post-acute phase concussion syndrome, where you see all these routine and continual impairments such as degradations in vigilance and attention. There is research on that too, because you know, that's obviously like a big, creatine has a bad stigma in the military, unfortunately, and I know it does in like professional athlete communities too, but it's huge in the military because, like, you look at the guys who supplement with creatine, like the work hard, party hard, play hard. They're also like staying up really late. They're also drinking. They're also not hydrating, and so creatine in that instance, because you have to overhydrate when you're creatine loading and doing creatine maintenance, can lead to dehydration. And if you're drinking and not drinking enough water on top of that, that's a recipe for a disaster. So unfortunately, we still have this like old guard of senior leaders in the military who think that creatine should and ought to be a banned substance because of all these like immediate negative side effects that were actually due to something else.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh my goodness. I never heard of anybody saying anything bad about creatine. So, you know, I know you guys are all the different animals, you know, interesting story. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So now your main takeaways from the conference, for people out there to know, just your, what you're expecting in the future and what are the main things that we learned from this second annual Society for Neurosports conference. Let me hear that.
Well, I think we need a bigger venue. I think we're growing. So we
so often say like 2 years in, right?
Yeah, we need a bigger system. So I think what's great is I like Allison, I go to sleep conference, I go to neuroscience conference. Lately I've been going to ISSN because those are where my friends are. But what I love about it, and this was our goal, is that you really do get people coming from different disciplines to have a conversation. And so you have people who are all studying sport neuroscience, but from different perspectives. So you have exercise physiologists in the room with neuroscientists, in the room with sports psychologists, having these conversations. And what I've noticed is the kind of research collaborations that are coming out of this are incredible. And just the learning that's taking place, because if I go to neuroscience conference, I kind of know what they're talking about. They're talking at a very high level, and I'm not, I'm learning new things. But this is like, for the first time, I'm hearing physical therapists give an academic talk about something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to next year, really doing that again, having the diversity of talks around this field of sport neuroscience and just getting all these people in the room.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah. I mean, I second, Dr. Tartar. It's kind of funny because speaking on that, like, she and I have known about each other for like over 10 years now, but we've never actually met until she tagged me on an Instagram post about attending the first Neurosports. And it's for that very reason, is because like she had gone to different conferences, I had gone to different conferences, but yet we had mentors and colleagues of the same group of people. And like our mutual friend, Dr. Richie Brown, would be like, yeah, you need to meet Jaime. And he would tell, Jaime, like, yeah, you need to meet Allison. And then, Dr. Tartar's advisor, Dr. Tim McKenna, told me, like, yeah, you need to meet my postdoc, Jaime. And then he told her the same thing. And it literally took 10 years to bring this community together. Wow. And now we're all connected. But it's all like-minded people, right? Like, that's what's so great about Neurosport, the Society for Neurosports, is like, we all practice what we preach. Like, our career is planned around our lifestyle, and that when we are experts in exercise science and sleep, we're actually doing the work outside of our research to be athletes and to get good quality sleep and to eat properly and do all those things that are part of that lifestyle.
So fantastic. Now, guys, let's not wrap up before we put over Julius Thomas's work. Mira Singh, oh my gosh, he was amazing. What did you guys think about that presentation?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
really.
go ahead.
Well, I'll talk about Julie. She'll talk about Mita. So because I met Julie sort of the same thing. It was very happenstance. We were at a lecture together, and it's one of those things where, like with Allison, when you meet somebody, you feel like you've known them your whole life, and we share a lot of the same academic passions. So I was so grateful that he was willing to do those internet interviews, because I think it's hard. I lecture virtually. Most of my students come to class virtually now, and it's hard to talk into a void because you're not getting that feedback. And I just couldn't believe what a good job he did bringing the virtual audience sort of into the conference. And I just can't say enough nice things about him. He's one of my top 5 friends and favorite people in the world.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think our session went really well, and I was super excited to have Dr. Singh and Dr. Granier, because they've been pioneers in trailblazers in the sleep research community, particularly with sleep health, for a very long time. And the 3 of us, 6 years ago, we sort of put this idea of studying sleep in athletes on the map for the Sleep Research Society. We held the first annual looking at sleep health in athletes symposia at the sleep conference in 2016 in Denver. And it was just crazy how much success we had in the first year, from being part of this sleep task force that the NCAA decided to launch, to writing an actual chapter on mindful sleep practices for athletes in a handbook that went out to all coaches, trainers, and people of every single sport of the NCAA, from Division I down to Division III, to us individually consulting with high-level NCAA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA teams, to directing and studying sleep health in one of the largest athletic departments in the United States, the University of Arizona. That's Dr. Michael Grander's stuff. It was just really cool to talk about these early shared experiences and lessons learned, and where we can go ahead. And I think the biggest thing to emphasize is it's more or less a message to other people in our community, the sleep research community, to get up in front to those coaches and to those organizations. Because I think the issue, and I see this a lot because I sit on human performance working groups with people who work for Major League Baseball right now, is they get these internet charlatans who think they know recovery on the internet, because they have a certain amount of followers, and they might say the right buzzwords, but there's no actual science or content beyond those buzzwords.
Yeah, it's just misinformation. Yeah, so, that's terrible. Yeah.
I love how that was such a huge focus, because it is, it is frustrating, I will say, as a scientist, right? You hear everyone wants to sleep better and everyone wants to recover better, but then you look to see who's actually advising and consulting these people.
Yeah.
And they aren't legitimate. So it was nice. It was sort of a call to action to our own sleep community, that we need to tackle this problem before it gets too far down the wrong direction.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Any thoughts? Any final thoughts? Anything you guys want to mention that maybe we forgot? Somebody from the conference who did a great job. Do you want to give a shout out?
Well, I think also one of the shout outs, I think I did a little bit to Dr. Banks and Dr. Collins' session. They did great, and it's nice to talk about cognition and mindfulness and hear about some of that work. But I think all the speakers just really hit the ball out of the ballpark. So and I just want to thank you, Carlos, for having us on and letting us talk about all these things that we think are so cool, even though maybe they're a little nerdy.
Yeah, we all feel like neuroscientists when we're around you guys. We feel real nerdy and real savvy.
We have a certification through Neurosports. You're more than welcome to take it.
Oh, sure. I'll do it. I'll do it in a heartbeat. Yeah, bring it on. I love that. Learn every day. It was an honor you guys invited me. Thanks to Allison, who made the made it possible, and for you to, just let me in.
She made it possible. She's the one who founded the society. So
yeah, that's true.
It's all her. She's president and founder of this society.
President, secretary, treasurer.
Wow, you're the everything. Yeah, a superwoman.
No, I'm the secretary.
Next year, we're going to again have a new venue, and so if anybody's interested, we're at neurosports.net, and we're mostly active on Instagram. I need to get better at Twitter, but definitely follow us, find out when the next conference is. Come join us. We're going to be in person and safe next year.
Hopefully, yeah.
COVID is taken care of. She's doing that.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Fantastic. And Allison, when can people find you on social media?
You should also ask Dr. Tartar where you can find her on social media. She has way more followers than I do.
She's Doc Jock Zzz.
I love that name.
Z. Thank you. That was the only good thing my ex-girlfriend did for me is she came up with that handle. So
wow, that's a pretty good name. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, but a pretty cool name. I love it. I do like it. All right. So thank you so much, guys, for taking from your busy time to be with us. And hopefully we'll do it down the road, another stellar show here on Sports Medicine. And we'll see at Neurosports 2022.
Hope so.
Hopefully in person. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. You guys know it. This has been Sports Medicine.